This is the day 13 build of 5 layers of AI. My name is Jude and you can call me Nirvana. I've spent 4 years working on AI with startups, agencies, even down to their clients. Here is what I want to talk about today. We're going to build a workflow together, and before we even go on, I want to address something, which is what most beginners actually do whenever they open make.com and they want to start working. Most people would go to make.com, they create a scenario, and they start adding a bunch of modules together. Add one more. Okay, let's see. Let's put a webhook. Okay, we can't use a webhook, right? All right, fine. Okay, they just start, adding it together, which is quite fine. However, if you have a project that you want to work on, if you just go in blindly, you realize that you have no idea on what you actually want to do. Because starting from the first phase, you don't even know where the data is supposed to come from. So what most of them do is probably, to, guess what, delete everything again, and we're back to scratch. But here is a fix that I'm going to walk you through. I call mapping on paper first. And before we get to that, we need to talk about two things that every single automation in the world is made of: a trigger and an action. That's it. It's just as simple as that. And what I just said now is more like a whole system, and it works in a way where when something happens, that's the trigger. So after that, do something about it, which is also the action. So basically, everything else is just filling in the middle. But the main thing we want to do is we want something to trigger the action. We have every other connection right in between. So what we are going to cover today, basically, well, three things. The first one is going to be the types of triggers that we have. One thing you need to know is that not all triggers fire the same way, and knowing the difference will save you a lot when you're building systems that that are slower than you think they are. The second one is the 4 types of actions that we also have, and the one most beginners actually skip, and this causes them error most of the time because they don't understand it. While the third thing is going to be the workflow mapping method, which in just 5 minutes on paper, you get to put things together before you even open make.com in the first place. So I'm going to map the entire day 15 live build right now on paper on day 15, and we have to put things together basically. So when we get to day 15, I'll just have to open make.com, and you already know what I'm building by then, even before I a single module on this empty canvas here. So first thing we're going to talk about is the 3 types of triggers, right? Here, the first type of trigger is the instant trigger, and that's the webhook. So we call it the webhook trigger. And a webhook trigger happens the moment something happens, like within a sub-seconds response time, the pipe immediately bursts open. And how this works in your make.com scenario is that you have something like this. You have webhooks like this. So there is custom mail hook and there is custom webhook. This is the one I'm talking about. So when you create a webhook, it gives a functionality of listening to something happen outside and immediately take action in this particular scenario. Now, one thing I'm going to point out very soon, because we are going to build something on day 15 based on what I've said, is that there are webhooks like this, which is basically custom webhooks. That means you can configure this to work in various systems, various softwares, or various services online. There are also, non-custom webhooks, which are these webhooks are specialized and built specifically for a particular service. Now, an example I'm going to give here is, let me pick out from Tally, because we're going to use Tally a lot. This is a webhook from Tally. Now, you can see it's showing here as a webhook as well. This is configured to work mainly for Tally. We can have the same thing for, let me see, Notion should have a webhook, right? Yes, Instant Acid as well, you can see. So these are custom made for each services. So the same thing applies for a couple of other services out there as well. Hold on, let me take this off. So how does a webhook work? When you have a custom URL that is being made, this is how to kickstart a webhook. You create a webhook, and you give it a name. You can give it any name. Let me say, for example, let's just assume I want to get just anything, my first webbook. So I can just save it like this, and it's going to create a webbook URL for me. Here's a webbook URL. I've copied it now. Now this is a custom URL that I can connect to any external tool that has something to report, basically. So it calls that URL immediately, and make.com inside this scenario is going to kickstart it. A real life example I can give you is form submission or even Tally. So I'm going to reference Tally right now. The same way we can take this and use it also applies the same way on Tally, right? So we can use, there are two ways we can call a form submission on Tally. We can either use this, which was made specifically for Tally, and just have it connect, because I've connected it already and it even still has its URL, right? Or I can have it, I can create the connection which works with OAuth connection. That means I'll be able to connect directly to my Tally account online. This will directly connect to our Tally account. And let's do this. Let's go to Tally integrations. I have a form that I've created already. I can just go to Tally integrations in their settings. This also applies to others, Typeform, various other platforms out there, that all you need to do is, let me just delete this for example, and I will look for, since I have my integrations page now, I'll look for webhooks, and here I have webhooks, and I'm going to insert it here and have it connected. Now since I've connected it now, I can go back to make.com. It is actually listening, it's working very well. So the same thing applies for several other platforms. Now let's do something very quick so you get to see how fast this works, this webhook works. Remember, this same thing is also this. Since we've added the URL in Tally already, this works exactly this as well. However, this is a custom webhook that can be used for any platform, while this can only be used by Tally. So these are the two types of webhooks that we have, right? Let's fill in the form real quick now, and we get to see it work live. So here I have Jude, here I have my email, here I have a number. So I have my website here, and what are your hobbies? Reading books, listening to podcasts, whatever it is. I have my request, hey, what's up? All right, I'm using that intentionally actually. So, and I submit this, and yeah, I have it in, and guess what? Okay, my first webbook. Okay, I just need to save it now. Yes, so it is saved now. I'll run this module rather, and it listens immediately. So because of the break just now, I need to restart again. Let's do this. Jude, email, phone number. I just put anything. This we pick reading books, and we say, hey, what's up? All right, so I want you to look at this. It's still rolling, right? And enter, and you see it arrived immediately. I didn't spend up to half a second just now, and it arrived immediately. So what you see there, you can see, let me look for the fields, and I bring the last one. I think that was where I said, hey, what's up? So from what we see here now, you get to understand that this applies to every platform, and what it does is instant trigger fires. So if it's someone booking your Calendly appointment, or let me say your Stripe payments, this webhook will recognize it as an instant trigger in make.com, and it's going to fire it up immediately. This is the first type of trigger. Now the second type of trigger is what I call scheduled. It's a scheduled trigger. Now this runs on a clock that you set. It has nothing to do with any external events. It just wakes up by the time you tell it to run. So you can decide, in this case, this one works like a custom way where you just go by yourself and you pick how it should run. So in this case, let us use another platform. Let's use Google Sheet. So we have this in place, and I have my connection already. Update your connection required. All right, so I have to update my connection. Okay, don't know if you can see the screen though, but I'm trying to sign in. Okay, all right, I think I almost. All right, so we have it signed in already, and yeah, we're good to go. Now, from what you can see here, when we take this trigger, when you notice what happened here, I took this clock. This clock on make.com is basically the one telling you where the first action takes place, where the trigger takes place. So from what you see here, you see that it changes. Let's have this change. It's changing. Okay, I have to save and let's do this again. Yeah, it's working very well now. So anyway, from what we see here, we notice that this just changed. It changed from what we have here, which was showing, let's do this again. Immediately as data arrives, this is a webhook, right? And also this, immediately as data arrives. But we see a very slight change here that makes it turn to every 15 minutes. So we can actually set our time here. This is the scheduled trigger. This is something you can set in by yourself, that I want this every 15 minutes or every 1 minute or probably once a day, and you can set the time. Probably I want this by 6 p.m. or I want this by 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. Just anything. You can set it to any time there. Okay, I think I need to bring this down. So if we set this, let's activate this scenario. Okay, let's save anyway. So based on what we just did here now, I just showed you guys that you could actually manipulate when you want to receive a particular intake. Now, an example I'm going to give on this scheduled trigger is, you can just give an example where you get leads every day, right? Or you get a particular information every day on this Google Sheet. If I use Google Sheet, for example, let's assume that build a particular spreadsheet and you want to receive this information every single day. Anytime you update this spreadsheet for the day, now once a day, probably around 8 p.m. at night, you are tired from work and this what you just want to use it to check through what you did all through the day, and you want it sent to you. You create this automation here that sends it by 8 p.m. and you can have it send it to any channel you want, probably through WhatsApp, through Telegram or anything. It sends it directly to your inbox, so you get to check over everything before you go to bed. This is just a very simple example. It's kind of like a bad example. I've not been good examples lately. Anyway, so from what we noticed here, we made a scheduled trigger. So I call it the clock trigger because what? The scheduled trigger runs on a clock you set. It has nothing to do with external events once again. And you can let it, for example, you want to send a morning report, or every Monday, you want to run a weekly CRM click. That's like every Monday, let me say weekdays. You can choose weekdays from Monday to Friday. You can even choose it weekly, right? And that weekly, you can set it manually. Pick Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday, and you can have it, sent to you by this time. You could even have it run from a particular time. There's just a lot of things you can do when it comes to a scheduled trigger. You can manipulate it. You can set it monthly as well, so it's only work on probably day 1, day 3, day 2. You can use this to do anything basically. So when you understand this, you understand that a scheduling trigger basically sets intervals for you, and the minimum interval I can say on a free plan, the minimum you can actually do on a free plan is this. So with everything we've been doing all this while, we can say that this as regular interval, we can only set 1 minute, and this is a paid make.com plan, and that is why I have 1 minute. But on a free plan, this is the one you have. Let me remove this advanced, and you can see I can add more schedules as well. So there are just many things you can actually do with this particular trigger. Okay, leave and discard. All right, so we have the third one, which is the polling trigger. So it's more like, I call it the check back trigger. This is the one. So basically, when you see how the scheduled trigger, whichever way you call it, works, is that you can just use it for almost anything. You can manipulate the time at regular intervals. That means you want it every 15 minutes. For mine, can go for as low as 1 minute, while for those on free plan, it max on 15 minutes, every 15 minutes. You can also schedule it based on, probably you have these morning reports you want to get, and you do it every 8 a.m. in the morning. It's going to run a particular automation, send you something very important. Or you can also do this daily. You can have it send it to you every single day, and you can also manipulate it to send on weekdays as well. So on Mondays to Fridays, you can have it sent to. On weekly, this time you have the functionality to actually pick the days yourself. So for Monday, Wednesday, you can pick on Saturday or Sunday as well. And when you see this, there's also monthly, meaning you can pick the days. Probably the first day of the month, every first day of the month, or every 10th day of the month, you want a particular automation to run, probably a CRM, update, just anything. You can even pick specific days. I mean, you can pick February every year, and you can pick the particular date in February. Though, well, February is not 31st, but well, you can pick 25th. But maybe this is a different timeline. Anyway, so and you can pick the time. So every single year you are going to be getting this automation, right? That is just how much power the scheduled trigger has when it comes to manipulating the exact time you want it to deliver, you want it to run a particular automation. So once again, you need to be aware that, well, we can use advanced settings, we can scheduling as well. There are many more things you can do. So you need to be aware that on free plan on make.com, the minimum you have is 15 minutes, while we on a pro plan have 1 minute minimum. So if you're on free plan, this might be the one you have to resort to, but that's okay, and that should be able to still do a lot of things. And if you want otherwise, you could just go for a webhook. So the third type of trigger is the polling trigger. Now the polling trigger is what I also call the check back trigger. Now this is what a lot of people get wrong. This is the one that probably trips people that are starting with make.com or automations generally. So polling means in make.com means more like periodical checks on a source for a new data. So what is happening here is that it's not using the real time. It is not instant. It doesn't happen instantly. It just acts on a specific schedule as well. It asks if there is anything new. Now, what I mean there is that when you want to know what a schedule trigger does, a schedule trigger is a type of a polling trigger. Because a polling trigger, what it can do, for example, this watch Google Sheets, watch new rows in Google Sheet, right? One thing you need to know is that, okay, fine, make.com checks the sheets every 15 minutes on free plan, right? When someone adds a row, probably around 8 a.m., you might not get the scenario until 8:15. Alright, so when someone adds a row to your Google Sheet by 8 a.m., you might not actually get it until 8:15, right? But here's the trap now. Google Forms is a type of a polling trigger itself. It is not a webhook trigger. Now, one thing you need to know is that while this one gives us a schedule, this itself is a polling trigger. The module itself is a polling trigger. What I mean here is that I showed you the other time that it's quite different. It works differently. When I bring this here, or here, okay, I need to bring it back and see what happens. Alright, so when I bring this here on this tool, once again you can see the changes that is being made. You can let it arrive immediately. We can also still set the others. But this immediately only comes up when it comes to webhooks, while when it comes to using modules like this, we notice that it changes. It changes because this module itself is a polling module. So what happens there is that it gives it this trigger, which means that if someone submits our lead intake form by 2:15 a.m., for example, on a free plan, the scenario might not process until 2:29. That's after 15 minutes. For most use cases, actually, this is fine. It doesn't. But if you are selling to a client on a basis that their lead gets a response in under a minute, you need a webhook trigger rather than a polling trigger. Now, the solution behind this is when you use platforms like Typeform or Tally that we just used recently, or you use Tally here, instead of Google Forms, let me show you the examples now. This is Google Sheets, not Google Forms, right? Sorry about that. I'm going to refer to this quickly. So when you look at Google Forms, we have get a response, make update, get a response, Google Form itself. So we see that we are able to watch responses as well. Now, when you look at this, there's watch response acid, watch response in Google Sheets. We want this. Now, this is also expecting response from outside, right? So, but we notice that once we use this, it doesn't what? It doesn't change. It doesn't change to immediately the same way this does. This is Google Forms. This is a form itself. This is also a form. This is basically the example of a polling trigger. So in this case, you understand that what? While they all are forms, right? Tally and Typeform, for example, support Webhook Triggers, and they have generous plans as well with real-time lead intake, which means that once the person fills in the form, it gets submitted immediately. So I personally use Tally. I was into using Google Forms when I started, until I realized that Tally is free. In most cases, you can do anything. Tally is being used to run even businesses itself on this same free plan, because they are just so generous with their free plans that I don't think there's any other form that you need, unless you probably receive a response of probably 100,000 response in a month. You are an enterprise already, so yeah, obviously you do need to pay for it. But if you're not getting up to that, honestly, you can use Tally. It's free and clean, and it sends a webhook on every submission. So yeah. So pro tip, more like pro tip, you need to always ask this before before choosing a form, before choosing, probably you are not using Tally or Typeform in this case. You need to first confirm if what you are choosing sends a webhook. If the answer is no, in most cases I just tell you find another tool. Just find another tool entirely. So that is it for triggers. Now the next one we're going into is the 4 types of actions. When it comes to any action module in make.com, an example of what we see, what we pass through is this. When you notice the difference of, okay, so there are 4 types of actions in automation generally, and when it comes to make.com modules, inside any action module in make.com, there is function is like one type of these 4 types basically, and they are either the create, the update, the search, or the delete. Now to show you through all this while I explain, you can actually follow it here. You can follow it, this particular line here. So the first one is the create. That means to make something new, right? The create probably adds a new record to a destination. Like an example, if you add a new row to Google Sheets, which is something like this, you are watch new rows, you could have it, let me show you this. So Google Sheets, right? So you could add a new row, right? Or you could add a new row, you could it should be anything create here. So you can see we have create as well, create a new spreadsheet, create spreadsheet from templates. So basically we have a create, that is to create something new entirely, and it can even be probably on Notion instead. Let's go to Notion, and that is to create a data source item, to create a data item, to create a database, create a data source, basically create a page. Just create a database itself. So what I'm just trying to say here is that that's the first type of action that you see most of the time, while the second one we see is the updates. An example is what we see here. There's update a page, there's update a database. What this does basically when it comes to updates is updates modifies the record that already exists. So before you say something updates or in a particular CRM or anywhere, you need to ensure that record exists somewhere already. So an example can be when you are changing a lead status in a CRM from new to contacted. That means you've reached out to the person, or probably to sealed. You just, in this case, in your CRM, you get to update the due value in your CRM. Or you can even do something as, let me see if we have something here, email, you can even mark an email as read or unread. So it's also under updates, because it updates what's currently there to something else. It just transforms it to another form, basically. So, but here is a critical rule when it comes to you cannot update something without first knowing which specific record to update. That means before any update action happens, you need to already search for it first, and that's where the third action happens. That is the third type of action, which is this. So we have the search. We have an example here, which is search for email. Let's see if we have another thing here. Let's go back to Notion. You should have something like search here, search object. There should be another one here, right? Let's see. Okay, so we have just search object, search page. Okay, everything is into one now. So this search object can search for objects in a page in a database or itself. So you can see you need to first search before you are able to. You need to look for it and be specific on it being that particular thing that you want to update. So you search, then update. So an example here is if you are looking for a particular Notion database now, you are looking for a particular Notion item inside a page or inside the database, you need to first search for the object before you are able to update it. So let's see if we've not made our connection here, so we'll skip this for now. Since we are going to create something very soon in a soon to be class, I will assume we just do everything single thing. So anyway, when it comes to updating, you need to first before you can update. That is the basic rule. So the next thing I believe is delete. That's the next one I can point out here, which let's see if we have this here. So we have a delete a page content. This is another example. So this is another type action to delete. Delete is exactly what it sounds like basically. I don't think I need to explain further. So you won't have to use this every day, and bet it with me, I've never used it. So, but when you need it, it is, it's there. So it's basically used for cleaning old records, to remove processed queue items, or archiving, completed leads basically. So, these are the four main types of actions when it comes to using these modules on make.com. The one combination most people get wrong actually is when a new lead comes in and they want to update their status in CRM. It's basically like you saying we have someone just filling a form on Tally, right? Let's see. Let's use Notion and Tally together. And mind you, Notion is actually the same company that made Tally. So they're basically the same company. And I like their color, the black and white, obviously. So anyway, so you want to, okay, I think I have the right thing here. But let's assume I'm waiting for a new response this time around. And I decide after getting that response, I want to update instead. So let's choose this. Now, in this case, what happens here is I am trying to do something that is impossible. I'm getting new leads. This is a new lead intake. I'm getting new lead that is just fresh right from there, and I'm trying to update it on my Notion database. What happens here is that it's going to call for an error, basically. Why it calls for an error is because it requires something which I call a record ID. That means before you can update a particular item or a particular lead, particular information, you need to first call onto it by searching, right? And to search for it, you need to be specific on which record. That means you need to either have a unique identifier. I remember mentioning this yesterday that we're going to talk about a unique identifier, and we're still going to talk about it, definitely not on this video. However, I'm pretty sure that most of this explanation will make you understand how that works fully. So you need to have the ID first, the ID of the particular data source item that you want to update. So the right flow that you're actually supposed to have here, if you want to update a particular record, is to first have this, then bring in a search, which in this search you get to input the particular ID inside. When you input this ID, this is what you use to look for the updates, and then you update it. That is basically how it is. So this is the right flow to it. The search module hands you the record ID. The update module uses the ID from it to update it into the right record. So the extra search module is a module that most beginners don't add. And I'll be very honest, I also made this mistake while starting. I thought I needed to update it immediately. You need to first look for it before you're able to update it. So when it comes to mapping on paper, this is what we're going to do. Anytime before you open make.com. So before you open make.com, I want you to write 4 sentences outside basically. This is what I use every time I want to work across something. This is what I call the physical paper method, or the paper method, or the mapping paper method, whichever way you call it. So the first thing you need to write is when, then collect, then you write if then and put. Let me see if I can have it here. I have this as okay, so I have this as the first one is when, then the second is then the third is if then the fourth is put. Now with these 4 in place, let me just adjust that. With these 4 in place, I just want to show you how this looks like. Now the first sentence, which says when, is basically asking when an event happen. So when which events needs to happen. When, an example, someone fills in a form, where does it happen? That's when someone fills in a form in Tally, for example. So this is your trigger, basically. This is your trigger. When someone, you know what, let me just make it this way. When event in, then you put the 2. That's it. Yeah, I think I should have this here already. I have it set up together. So I should have this. So I mean, we should just skip that basically. So when event happens in 2, that's an example is when someone fills in a form immediately in Tally, then they collect. What this is doing is it's basically asking, and I collect these specific fields from the trigger. That means if someone fills in a form in Tally now, for example, what is going to go in, the fields are going in the name, the email, that's the name, the email, the phone number, the websites, the hobbies, the request. In this case, those are the things that follow it through. This is what is going to collect. Now, if then is basically working in a way where it's saying if this condition happens, then you should perform this action. Otherwise, perform this action. Now, the otherwise is basically stating an alternative. It's telling you this is what else should happen if this doesn't happen. Now, this is basically trying to explain how the previous day we talked about routers, right? We talked about routers. Okay, we have it here. Let's just save this anyway. So the previous days we had routers, save anyway. So we had this together. So you get to see that what we have here is basically an example that when someone submits a form on Google Forms, for example, it collects the data, it processes it, and it sends here. Now, if it doesn't send here, then with condition, it should send here instead. So this is the alternative option. If this doesn't happen, or if this doesn't qualify to this, then it should send here instead. That is where the when the collects, that's when the collect and the if then works in. So in this case, if then is like if condition then action. Then there is else, else comes in, is like if then else, or if then and else. So basically if it fills in a particular condition, you just end it in here. If it fills in a particular condition, which is the filter, right? So what we're addressing here now is the router, but the filter, if it fills in this condition here, which we have here, then this should happen. It should send the email, right? So else, it should come back there. That is the full explanation on if then, or more or less me saying if then else, right? So now the fourth one is the put. The put works is basically saying put this data into these 2. Now what we are doing here is we've already done the put automatically with the option here. So it says if it satisfies this condition, then you should send it over here and put. or else it should what come back here. It's basically just trying to satisfy the final outcome. This is what you have been trying to look for. Now basically the way I say it is, every single time before I even start, when I put this together, I'm more initially concerned about where it's coming from and how it eventually gets here. Whatever comes in the middle can be manipulated in a way, because I see it as something that you can decide to use any option here. You can decide to actually use any option here, any feature, any tool that just ensures that you get your output when it gets here. It's as simple as that. So anything that comes through here, probably due to different tools, different services, different pricing, any condition, so far you have the middle part solved. More concerned initially about where it's coming from, how we take it from here, and how we get here. So when we understand these are the 2 points we first start with, then we are now concerned about, okay, how does it process to reach there? What process would it take to actually reach there? That is where I start bringing out that concern. So a live example is just basically this, where someone submits a form on Google Forms, right? Once again on Google Forms, and it processes the data, it collects the necessary data it needs and processes it on Grok AI, and then it chooses this particular place to send it to. So if the budget is that's 2,000, between 2,000 to 5,000, it sends here directly. If or else it's sends here if it's over 5,000. So that's what is happening. That is basically what is happening. That's it. In 5 sentences, I have been able to basically bring that out, where you get to understand. It's basically 4 sentences. That's the 4-sentence framework. That's I just explained, but I can put it 5 sentences because we have an else. So we have an else, so we can make it 5 sentences, right? So anyway, to head back to how we started all this in the first place, we're concerned about 3 things, which is the trigger, the router, and the action. So we were first concerned about the trigger and the action, right? But we understand that in this particular phase, we need to consider the router in place. Now the whole scenario can just be summarized briefly in that 5 sentences, saying that when this happens, collect the data. If it passes a condition, sends to it, else sends to something else that is different. So that's basically all this. And if you believe you want to write something and you can't summarize this in this sentence, basically, I don't think you can build that scenario. If you cannot approach it the same way, it's not a make.com's problem now. It's more of you figuring it out problem. So you need to go back to that same sentence I just gave out, and you can always get it here, which is these 4 sentences. That's when this happens on these 2, collect these specific things that I need and process it. If it passes this condition, then send it here. Otherwise, put it here instead. So that is how everything just maps. And a live example is basically what I've shown already. So you can follow and map this thing out the same way it is, just map it out. The only difference here, I believe they use, let me delete this. If I delete this, it's already referencing a lot of things now. Well, we can just have it here. Now, rather than just, pass through here, we could also add one more thing. We could let it save in those data somewhere. One thing you need to know in this particular scenario is that we've not even saved anything in any database. We're only processing it and sending emails to them. Where are we saving the leads that we're getting from Google Forms? So that's where Notion comes in. And that's where you use Notion to save these details. So you get to create, since new lead, you can create a data source item. Same thing applies here. You can also create a new data source item from here, or a new data source legacy from here. So with this in place, I can say we actually have our put now finally. So we have our when, and we have our collect from this field, process it, and we have our if it passes this condition, send through, then send through, or else come through here. and after it passes through either of these two, it puts here automatically. So this is in case of a form. In this case, we need to save their details somewhere else, so we get to refer to them anytime. Rather than Notion, also we can also use what, Google Sheets, we can use Airtable or several other platforms. All these things are things we can actually work on, and I'm going to show you more about it in when we are going to make our full build on day 15 basically. So new concepts today that we addressed the first thing, that's triggers, right? There are 3 types of triggers. There is the instant trigger, that's a webhook. There's the scheduled for clocks, which is a type of polling trigger, and there's the polling trigger itself, which is coming from the app itself, which is like a periodic checks, and the other one, which is actions. Now those actions gave birth to the 4 types of actions, which are the create, the update, the search, and the delete, right? So, and one thing you need to know is you always search before you delete. And now the method that you use to approach building any AI automation on platforms like make.com, Anything, and several others is you writing a 4 sentence on a paper before you even start anything you want to build in the first place. Now I believe if you find this helpful and you want to build one, you can check the resource guide I added below in the description, and you follow it and you're able to build and set up your own workflow like this. So you can see I actually added everything in detail. This thing took me quite a long time to put all these things together. For each day I have to put all this to ensure that whoever is going to follow through is able to learn and understand every single time. So if you enjoyed this video like others, please subscribe. And this is a part of the series where every day for the next 60 days I'm going to explain the whole 5 layers of AI, so you stay up to date right from the release of AI into the public in 2022. And I believe you are still early, so just follow along and stop chasing hypes, AI hype that you see online. And tomorrow we are going to be talking about data mapping. That is very important because you are going to learn how to connect the fields from your trigger and the field into your action as well. So this is just more like a drag and drop process that even if you're a beginner, you can understand. And I will tell you, you can't even get anything wrong. You can't get anything wrong when we're working on this. So yeah, if you have any question, ask me in the comment section, or just drop a message, whichever platform, whichever channel I'm going to post this. I haven't made a decision on that yet, but see you on the next video.